All right, welcome everybody to today's video. What I'm gonna do for you today is a really quick demonstration on how I do long-term food storage using Mylar bags, mason jars, and oxygen absorbers. I've been doing this process for about 10 years. I'm gonna talk to you about the lessons that I've learned and the mistakes that I've made specifically doing this process. We'll talk a little bit about some do's and don'ts and also maybe cover some recommendations that I've seen online that maybe I don't necessarily agree with. At the end of the video, we're going to go through some of these long-term preps that I have. Maybe we'll bust a few open. We'll see what they look like. We'll see if they're still viable as best we can tell. And let's get started. So at a minimum, what you need to make this process work is obviously some Mylar bags. They come in all different shapes and sizes. You can choose whatever works for you. It might depend on what it is you're trying to store in these bags. I generally don't go over pretty much gallon size. I like to store things in small, compact bags. You're gonna need oxygen absorbers. Oxygen absorbers, we'll go into a little bit more detail about these in just a couple minutes. And then essentially what you need is a way to seal the bags closed. I like to use a hair straightener. I've seen other people use irons and all kinds of things, but you're gonna need a way to seal the bag once you've got the food and the oxygen absorbers inside. Today I'm not gonna fill any mason jars. I've got a whole bunch here that are already pre-filled and they've been around for years. I'm gonna show you what those look like here in a minute. I'm going to do a quick demo using some lentils, which I don't normally do, so this is something that I'm gonna add to my stockpile. And we'll go through a different couple kinds of rice. I just want to give you a brief demonstration on sort of how this works so you can get a visual and then you can just start doing it on your own. All right, while my hair straightener is warming up, well, it's not my hair straightener, it's my wife's hair straightener. In case you're wondering, let's talk really quickly about oxygen absorbers. Oxygen absorbers come in different sizes and different quantities per package. What I like to do is 300 cc oxygen absorbers in packs of 10. The reason I do this is because once you open this bag and expose these things to the air, you're essentially on the clock at that point. I've seen people online who will buy like 100 packs of these and then they'll try to reseal them and keep the ones that they don't need. This is a terrible idea. I'm telling you, once these things are exposed to the air, they need to go inside the jars or the Mylar bags and you need to get them closed as quickly as possible for these things to be the most effective. Any good oxygen absorber should also have an indicator inside the package. This one happens to be pink. So if all of your packages show that the absorbers, the indicator is pink, I know that this bag of oxygen absorbers hasn't been compromised. Once I open this and these things are exposed to the air, these turn color. I think these turn purple if I remember right. So that's one way that you can tell if they're any good or not. If you were to open a big, huge bag of these and then try to reseal it, and then you notice and when you look inside that they're all starting to turn color because you've exposed them to too much air, they become worthless. And you're gonna be using oxygen absorbers that are basically gonna fail you. So I like to do the 10 packs, 300 cc. You can buy a whole ton of these things. They're not expensive. In fact, I bought this huge bag of 100 packets right here. Online, it was probably like 10 bucks or something. Like, it's really not that expensive. Go in small quantities. Some people like to use 100 cc or smaller. What I've learned over the years is that you can sit down and do all the math and try to figure out, you know, for a quart size or a gallon size or a 5-gallon Mylar bag, you can do the math and figure out exactly how many cc's you need. I started doing that in the beginning. I don't do that anymore. I take 300 cc for a gallon size bag. I throw 2 or 3 in there and it's always more than enough. So I wanted to mention here what I'm going to be using today is our 1-gallon Mylar bags. I fill them about halfway or so that I can get them sealed. This is generally what it looks like. One technique that I see people use online that I really like is putting larger Mylar bags or multiple small bags into 5-gallon buckets with a sealed lid. I think this is a great idea. It's not something that I actually currently do, but it makes them obviously, hopefully watertight. It keeps the rodents out, and they're easily stackable. So, I mean, that's a tip that I like. I don't personally do it. I think I'm gonna start doing it, but I wanted to mention it. When it comes to Mylar bags, I started out using 3 mil. The mil is the thickness of the bag. I quickly found that these were too thin. I didn't like how thin the bag was. I switched to 5 mil, and I think these are all 5 mil now. 5 mil seem to hold up pretty well. But I did notice online that they're doing like 10 and 15 mil now, which are really thick. As far as I'm concerned, the thicker the better. The less chance you have of having this bag be compromised, the better. So I've had these for quite a long time, but I'm probably gonna switch to the thicker bags. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna fill these Mylar bags before I open the oxygen absorbers. The oxygen absorbers, like I mentioned before, they're gonna get opened at the very last minute, thrown inside. I'm gonna get these bags sealed, and that should be the end of the process. I'm gonna start with lentils. These are pretty small bags of lentils, so I am going to put these in the same bag, in the same Mylar bag. I suppose in theory you could just stick this whole bag in there with the plastic and all. I don't trust plastic at all, especially when it comes to my food. So there's pretty much no way in hell I'm gonna do that. I'm just gonna put this stuff in without the bags. Okay, so that is 4 pounds of lentils in this Mylar bag. I'll try to show you what it looks like. So it's filled just about halfway, which is about the way that I like to do it. All right, then I'm gonna switch over to the rice. This is a 5-pound bag of rice. Like I mentioned, and a lot of people might think this is crazy, but I don't like to fill these bags all the way up. I like to have a lot of room at the top so I can really close it off really well. And I'm gonna show you something really interesting in a minute that will sort of solidify why I think that that is important. So on a 5-pound bag of rice, for these size bags, I'm probably gonna go ahead and divide it into 2 separate bags. Now, especially with rice, and I suppose with lentils too, like you can make a hell of a mess if you're not doing this right. And so going back to the 5-gallon bucket suggestion or anything similar to that, I like that a lot of people will put their bags inside there and they're sort of freestanding at that point, and it makes them easier to fill. I've just been doing it this way for a long time. So I got the first bag here. All right, we'll get this last bag filled up and we'll finish up this part. Okay, so what I've got, 1 bag of lentils, 2 bags of rice. Normally when I do this, I do it in much larger quantities, mostly because I don't like to waste oxygen absorbers. In a bag this size, 300 cc, 2 is enough. I'm actually gonna put 3 because I have them and I don't want them to go to waste. And today I'm not gonna be filling up any more bags. 2 bags of rice, 1 bag lentils. Let's go ahead and get the oxygen absorbers in there and we'll get them closed up. One I'm always gonna stuff down near the bottom, 1 on top. Actually, I changed my mind. I'm only gonna do 2 because in my experience, you really don't need more than that. And some of these will go to waste and that's okay. I'm not, like I said, gonna try to reseal them back into the bag. So we're gonna do that. Now, the last part is going to be, what you wanna do is you wanna fold the bag a little bit over, and then you're basically just going to start heating up the bag to seal it. Around. I have noticed that some of the newer bags online, they actually have like a zip top, so they close, and then you can actually just seal the top of the bag. Maybe that's a more efficient way to do it. I really don't know. I've just had a lot of these bags for a long time. This is just the way I've always done it. Maybe those work better, I'm not sure. So basically all I want to do here is just go through, use your iron and ironing board or whatever it is you like to do to kind of go in different directions to make sure that these seal up really well. Like that. All right, that's the gist. This bag sealed up. Try to straighten this up. Okay, once those are all sealed up, historically what I've done is I will just write on the bag what is inside and the date, or the month at least, that I sealed it up. Same thing with mason jars. I just write on the lid what it is. Although one thing I think I'm going to start doing a little bit differently is I'm going to start basically cutting off information off of the packaging, nutritional information in case I need it. If I'm doing pasta this way, I might, want to see maybe even the expiration date, which you could write on the bag as well. But if there's anything on the bag that you think would be beneficial, I would cut that out, tape it to the bag, but also be sure to write exactly what it is in case for some reason that gets separated from the bag itself. So I wanted to mention there's only really like 4 things that I store this way. One is beans in every variety, pasta in every variety, obviously rice, and then lentils. I mean, these are sort of some staples for me, things that I know store really well long term. I don't necessarily have to worry about botulism or other types of problems with it being stored this way. So those are the things that I primarily do. I know there are a lot of people online in videos that talk about stuff like salt and sugar. My take on salt and sugar is that this stuff already, if it's stored in a dry, dark, cool place, will pretty much last indefinitely, or at least the shelf life on it is considerable. I don't see any reason to take this stuff and put it into a Mylar bag. Obviously, you may think differently. The other thing about these is you wouldn't want to use an oxygen absorber with them. The very first time I did this, I actually took a large mason jar like this and I filled it full of sugar and threw a bunch of oxygen absorbers in there. And then when I went to check it later, I noticed that it was basically a big brick. You'd have to just chisel away at that sugar to get it out of there. So pretty much anything that's like a powder or in powder form, you don't want to use oxygen absorbers for that. I've also noticed a lot of people talk about stuff like flour or storing flour in this way. I think putting flour into a Mylar bag, it keeps the light out, it keeps the moisture out. I mean, there's reasons to do it, I suppose, but I mean, even just looking at this one, the shelf life on this, if it's stored properly, is 2 years. I happen to use enough flour in my day-to-day that this stuff gets rotated out pretty often. So I don't necessarily, while I do store a lot of this in my house, I don't necessarily store it using this method. The other thing to think about, and this is worth even doing a little bit of extra research on, so I don't have to spend a lot of time on it here today, is there are a lot of things that you do not want to store this way. I mean, I already kind of mentioned what happens when you use sugar and stuff like that, but another great example is brown rice. So this is all jasmine basmati rice. Like, I don't do any brown rice. Why? Because brown rice has a lot of oils in it. The moisture content is much higher. The same thing would apply to stuff like dog food. I've seen people talk about how they fill 5-gallon buckets full of, dog food to store for a long-term type of emergency. That's a terrible idea. I checked my dog's food today and it's like 19% moisture. Plus it has a lot of glucosamine and chondroitin and other things in it. There's no reason to try to use this process to store stuff like that. It's just going to get ruined and it's not going to work. I think the same thing probably applies to stuff like nuts. I mean, how awesome would it be to get some quart-sized bags of, Mylar bags and store like almonds or something for long term? There's too much oil in it. It's not going to work. Stuff's going to be rancid. It's going to be dangerous to eat. If you try to open that bag 5 years from now and eat it, it's not going to work. It's going to be spoiled. One thing I wanted to mention is, like a lot of things that I do in preparedness, and I think you should do too, is do practice runs, do trial runs. We talk about this a lot when we're talking about practicing our bug out strategies and in case of an emergency. I think with this particular process is very similar. About every other year or so, I'll open up some of the stuff that I've stockpiled just to make sure that it's still working like it's supposed to. you learn some really important things when you do this. One thing I've noticed in particular is I tend to store a lot of black beans this way. When I've tried to eat black beans that have been stored in a Mylar bag for 3, 4, 5 years, the amount of time it takes to rehydrate those beans is pretty considerable. In fact, what I have to do is soak them in a bowl of water overnight before I can even attempt to cook them. If you try to cook them, they get real stodgy and gummy. Is it still edible? Is it, would it get you by in a survival type situation? Absolutely, but it's gonna taste like crap. It's gonna not be very palatable. And so my point here is I would encourage you, as with anything you do in your preparedness, to do trial runs, practice what you're doing. Another important thing to think about along the same lines is, and you hear me say this a lot in my videos, is diversity. I order, these Mylar bags and oxygen absorbers are super cheap. They're made super cheap. You do not want to buy 1,000 bags in the same lot number from the same manufacturer and start using them. If there's something wrong with those bags or even the oxygen absorbers, you're gonna ruin everything. What I do is every year, I buy more bags from different manufacturers in small quantities, and I just start cycling through them. Same thing with mason jars. I use small jars, I use large jars. I use large jars that have, different size lids. I just try to basically diversify as much as I can, because if for any reason the quality of the jar or the lid or whatever is bad or faulty, I don't want to lose all of my preps. So I try to diversify a little bit there. So keep in mind, at their most basic level, Mylar bags are designed to protect things from exposure, like moisture and light, things like that. So a lot of people use Mylar bags for to protect other things as well. Me personally, I only do food storage this way. I have a lot of ways to store things. But like one example of what people do is like to store ammo into a Mylar bag, because it protects it, keeps the moisture out and all that. So I'm not gonna go into too much detail about what other people do, but if you look around online or if you experiment on your own, you might find other uses for Mylar bags in your preparedness as well. Okay, what I'm gonna talk about next is something that happened to me recently. So back in January, I ran through and did a bunch of food storage this way. And I did jasmine rice. And you can kind of see, how that looked when I did it. Hopefully you can see that. The bag sealed up really tight, all the air out of it. So that worked great. My other bag looks like this. It's squishy. There's clearly still air in this bag. I use the exact same number of oxygen absorbers in both these bags. I only filled them halfway, basically sealed them in the exact same way, but this one to me does not look as sealed as this one. So typically what I'll do, I've seen this a couple of other times, what I'll do is I will open this back up, likely I'll throw it away. Well, this is just from January, so I'll just rebag this. Sometimes if it's really old, I might just throw it away. But I have tried really hard to determine what happened here. Like why did this one not seal up the same way this one did? I keep trying to shoot a lot of this in one take, but for some reason today my GoPro keeps wanting to overheat and it shuts itself off. I gotta tell you, sometimes making YouTube videos is not as easy as you might think. I can tell you that either the bag was compromised in some way, the oxygen absorbers didn't work like they were supposed to, or I suppose it's possible that even though I sealed like the full top third of this bag, maybe air got in there somehow. I have no idea. So what I will typically do, if this has been in here for a long time, is I will rebag it, or I might even just dispose of it and start over. So earlier I was mentioning the thickness of the bags. One thing I did a long time ago as an experiment when I was doing a lot of pasta storage is I decided to take small boxes of angel hair pasta. This looks like September of 2020. So this has been almost 5 years that these have been in here. I threw some oxygen absorbers in there. Well, it doesn't look to me like a lot of the oxygen was absorbed. I didn't really think that this process was going to work all that well. One thing I did notice though, this is a 5 ml bag, and I'll try to show you a close-up of this if I can, but because I left this pasta in the cardboard boxes, the corners of those boxes is pretty sharp, and it almost penetrated the bag itself. So that's pretty risky, and I would never recommend, you know, storing anything like this. If it's in a box with sharp corners or whatnot, unless you use a really, really thick Mylar bag. I'm gonna open this thing up in a minute. We'll see what the pasta looks like after almost 5 years, and we'll also check the expiration date on the boxes. Okay, so as promised, we're gonna open this thing up and take a look at it, and I'll try to get the camera and show you some close-ups of this. Essentially, so this angel hair pasta in the box is from September of 2020, so this is almost 5 years old. Almost 5 years that this has been in here. Obviously, looking at it, it looks like I put 2 oxygen absorbers in the bag, so that would be 600 cc's, and it didn't look to be that was enough. So that's one consideration right there. Here's the pasta itself. I'm gonna bust this open. I'm not gonna cook any of it up, although maybe I should to try it. I mean, if I'm honest, it smells okay, looks okay. I know oftentimes, like with botulism or whatever, you can't necessarily, it doesn't have a smell to it. But to me, this still looks okay. It looks edible. And being that it's pasta, I would kind of expect that to be the case. The expiration date on the box is February 4th of 2023. So this technically expired a little bit over 2 years ago. Would I eat this? Absolutely, I would eat this. But moving forward, I don't plan to store pasta this way inside the boxes. I'm not gonna do that. Okay, the next thing that I wanna do is I'm just going to pick a random jar and open it up as well. Even though I can see through the jar, it doesn't look like the food has gone rancid. There's no like bug larva growing in there. I mean, the oxygen absorbers looked like they did what they were supposed to do. I'll just grab this one. So this one says, I marked it as medium grain rice from May of 2019. We're just gonna pour it out. I got a blue oxygen absorber in this one. I'm gonna guess this is maybe 100 cc. This one looks a little bit smaller than the other ones that I've been using. I'm gonna pour this out. And the jar looks pretty legit to me. Doesn't smell bad. Looks like there's another absorber in there. So it looks like for that particular jar, and it was sealed properly, I had 2 oxygen absorbers. Again, I think these were 100 cc. I'm not entirely sure, but they're definitely not more than 300. So that seemed to work pretty well. Looking through the rice, you know, it looks great to me. It doesn't have a smell. Nothing rancid about it, nothing growing in it. It smells fine. It's really not been in there that long. I know 5 years sounds like a lot, but that's really not a crazy amount of time. Would I eat this in an emergency situation? Absolutely. That's my video today. I hope this was really helpful to you guys. I know that there's a lot of people who do this whole process a little bit differently. I certainly still learn things from people. If you have recommendations, please put them in the comments because I'm still trying to learn from other people as well. I hope that some of the things that I mentioned here today were helpful to you. If that's the case and you're interested in more videos like this, more videos around emergency preparedness or bushcraft, I'm going to cover a ton of topics on this channel. Please feel free to subscribe. It will help me out. If you have ideas for content, leave those in the messages below as well. Until I get a video out to you guys next time, everybody stay safe out there and take care of yourselves.